The night my husband lost everything, he stood barefoot in our driveway at sunrise begging me not to leave him. His six-figure career was collapsing. His company accounts were frozen. And the woman he risked our marriage for had already disappeared. But the part one still can't forget? Only hours earlier, he had stood in our kitchen smelling like another woman's perfume, and laughed at me while I fed our newborn son in the dark. Not argued. Not denied it. Laughed. What happened next destroyed his career, exposed secrets I was never supposed to find, and forced me to become someone I never imagined I'd have to be. If you've ever loved someone who slowly stopped seeing your worth, if you've ever carried a family while the person beside you chased attention somewhere else, stay with me, because this isn't only a story about cheating. It's about the moment a quiet woman finally stops protecting the man who broke her. My assistant actually knows how to make a man feel appreciated, Daniel slurred as he stumbled through the kitchen at 1 a.m, carrying the sharp scent of expensive perfume that definitely didn't belong to me. And me? I just kept feeding our 3-month-old son his bottle beneath the dim kitchen light. By the next morning, Daniel's entire world was falling apart. But to understand how we got there, I need to take you back to the exact night my marriage finally shattered. The light over our stove had burned out weeks earlier, but I hadn't replaced it yet. Money had started getting strangely tight, even though Daniel insisted everything was under control. So the kitchen sat mostly dark except for the soft glow above the sink and the pale blue light from Noah's baby monitor resting on the counter. Our baby slept against my chest between sips from his bottle, making those tiny sleepy sounds newborns make when they're drifting between dreams and hunger. I was exhausted in a way no amount of sleep could fix. Then I heard Daniel's car pull into the driveway. Too fast. Too loud. The front door swung open, letting cold Ohio March air rush through the hallway before Daniel staggered inside, loosening his tie, grinning like he'd just left some celebration instead of another late night at work. Then the perfume hit me. Sweet. Floral. Young. Not the smell of a husband coming home to his wife and baby. Daniel looked over and saw me sitting there quietly in the dark kitchen. For a second, I thought maybe shame would finally appear on his face. Instead, he laughed. Actually laughed. "You're still awake?" he asked. I adjusted Noah carefully against my shoulder. "It's 1 a.m, I answered softly. Daniel tossed his keys onto the counter. Well, some people still have exciting lives. I looked down at our son instead of at him. That seemed to annoy him. "You know," he said while opening the refrigerator, "Vanessa actually understands what men need." There it was. Vanessa. The assistant whose name had slowly invaded every conversation during the last 6 months. Vanessa helped with reports. Vanessa stayed late. Vanessa organized meetings. Vanessa. 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 Daniel grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the counter smirking at me. "My assistant actually knows how to treat a man," he repeated. Like he wanted the words to hurt. Like hurting me made him feel powerful. I remember staring at Noah's bottle while he drank peacefully, completely unaware that his family was quietly collapsing around him. And strangely enough, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I was simply too tired to break down, too emotionally drained to fight anymore. So I just nodded once and kept feeding my son. Something shifted across Daniel's face then. Confusion maybe. Disappointment. Seconds later, the shower started running. I sat in that kitchen long after Noah finished eating. Rain tapped softly against the windows outside our small suburban Ohio home. We bought that house 4 years earlier, back when life still felt easy. Before promotions. Before distance. Before secrets. Back when Daniel held my hand in grocery stores. Back when he kissed my forehead while I studied for nursing exams. Back when becoming parents felt exciting instead of lonely. I carried Noah upstairs and laid him gently inside his crib. Daniel was already asleep. Or pretending to be. His back faced me while traces of perfume still lingered in our bedroom. I stood there staring at him for a long moment. Then I quietly walked downstairs again. Something deep inside me already knew the truth had been sitting in this house for months, waiting for me to finally face it. Daniel's office was near the garage. Lately he always kept the door shut, claiming work stress gave him headaches. I opened the desk drawer slowly. bills, past due notices, final warnings. My stomach dropped instantly. 3 missed mortgage payments, nearly maxed out credit cards, a retirement account partially drained, and underneath everything else, bank statements from an account I'd never seen before. Thousands of dollars missing. Hotel charges, jewelry purchases, luxury restaurants. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down. Suddenly every late night made sense. Every weekend conference. Every irritated response whenever Noah cried. Every ounce of distance between us. It all arranged itself into one ugly truth. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those papers. Long enough for the black sky outside to slowly fade gray. Long enough for the coffee maker to switch on automatically at 5:30. Long enough to realize my marriage might already be over. Then my phone rang. The sound startled me so badly I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. Hello. A woman's voice spoke softly. Older. Calm. Controlled. Is this Sarah Whitmore? Yes. A pause. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. You don't know me, honey, but you're not the only wife your husband lied to. My entire body went cold. The woman introduced herself as Linda Carter, the wife of Richard Carter, Daniel's boss. And before I could even process that, she added quietly, I think we need to talk about your husband. I looked toward the staircase where Daniel still slept peacefully upstairs while our son breathed softly through the baby monitor beside me. And for the first time all night, I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was something much worse. I met Linda Carter the next afternoon at a small diner off Route 42. The kind of old American diner where retired couples sit drinking coffee for hours and waitresses call everybody hon. The streets still glistened from the rain the night before, and the entire Ohio sky looked gray and exhausted. I almost turned around twice while driving there. But deep down, women usually know the truth long before they're ready to admit it. Linda sat in a booth near the window wearing pearl earrings and a cream-colored coat. Elegant in the quiet way older women sometimes are. Not flashy, just steady. When she saw me struggling with Noah's diaper bag and carrier, she immediately stood up. Oh, sweetheart, she said gently, you shouldn't be carrying all this by yourself. That nearly broke me, because Daniel hadn't offered to carry anything for me in months. Linda ordered tomato soup and grilled cheese before I could object. The kind of meal mothers order for daughters when they know they're barely holding themselves together. For several minutes we didn't mention Daniel at all. She just admired Noah sleeping peacefully beside me. How old? She asked. Then her expression shifted. Sadness moved across her face. My son used to be that small, she whispered. Men forget how difficult those years are on women. I swallowed hard. Linda folded her hands together carefully. Sarah, she began softly, I'm not calling because I enjoy humiliating another woman. Her eyes locked onto mine. I'm calling because your husband is helping destroy my family too. The air left my lungs. Linda explained that Carter Development had belonged to her husband Richard for almost 40 years. He built it from nothing after returning home from Vietnam. Daniel joined the company 7 years earlier and climbed the ladder fast. Too fast. Richard trusted him completely, treated him almost like a son. But 6 months earlier, suspicious expenses began appearing. Luxury hotels, fake conferences, business dinners that never happened. And attached to nearly every expense report was one name. Vanessa Green, 26. Single. Beautiful in that polished Instagram kind of way. She and your husband have been involved for months, Linda said quietly. Even though I already knew, hearing it spoken out loud still hurt differently. Like broken glass sliding under my skin. I looked down at Noah sleeping beside me. What does this have to do with your family? I asked. Linda's jaw tightened. Because Richard discovered money missing from company accounts. I blinked. How much? Over $80,000. My stomach twisted instantly. Linda slid photocopies across the table. Hotel invoices. Flight tickets. Jewelry purchases. All hidden beneath fake business codes. I recognized Daniel's signature immediately. He wasn't only cheating on you, Linda said softly. He was stealing. I stared at the papers until the words blurred together. Then Linda said something even worse. He told coworkers you were emotional, difficult, depressed. He implied your marriage was already ending because of you. For a moment I genuinely couldn't breathe. Not because strangers believed lies about me. Because Daniel had weaponized motherhood against me. The exhaustion. The hormones. The tears. The sleepless nights. Everything vulnerable I trusted him with. Suddenly moments from the past year looked different. Coworkers giving me awkward smiles at company parties. Vanessa looking at me with fake sympathy. Daniel encouraging me to stay upstairs and rest, while he entertained downstairs. He hadn't just betrayed me privately. He had been rewriting me publicly. Linda watched my face carefully. You didn't know? She whispered. I shook my head slowly. No. The waitress refilled our coffee quietly before walking away. For several moments only the sound of silverware and old country music filled the diner. Finally Linda sighed softly. Affairs don't begin in bedrooms, Sarah, she said. They begin in selfishness. That sentence stayed with me. Because suddenly the timeline became painfully clear. Daniel's promotion. The expensive suits. The gym membership. The criticism after Noah was born. Meanwhile I had been surviving on 3 hours of sleep, trying to keep our family alive. I stopped recognizing myself. I admitted quietly. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. That happens to mothers, she said. It does not make you unlovable. I nearly cried right there. Instead, I asked the question I feared most. Is he leaving me? Linda hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Finally she nodded once. There was an email draft Richard found during the investigation. My chest tightened. What did it say? Linda looked down briefly. He wrote, after the divorce, Vanessa and I can finally start over. Everything around. I thought about Daniel kissing Noah's forehead that morning like nothing was wrong. How effortlessly he lied now. Then something unexpected happened inside me. Not rage. Clarity. Cold, painful clarity. I heard my father's voice in my mind from years ago, before he passed away. Never make permanent choices during temporary pain. I took a slow breath. Then another. What happens now? I asked quietly. Linda studied me carefully. That depends on who you decide to become after this. When I drove home later that afternoon with Noah asleep in the back seat, I no longer felt confused. Heartbroken? Absolutely. Humiliated? Without question. But confused? No. For the first time in months, I could finally see the truth clearly. That evening after putting Noah to sleep, I reopened my nursing license renewal online. Then I called an attorney friend from church. Then I began photocopying every financial document inside Daniel's office. Quietly, carefully, methodically. By the time Daniel came home near midnight, I had already hidden the copies inside Noah's diaper box in the nursery closet. Daniel loosened his tie while walking through the kitchen. Probably another Chicago work trip this weekend, he said casually. I nodded while wiping the counter. Okay. He narrowed his eyes. You've been really quiet lately. I looked directly at him calmly. I'm tired. He smirked, satisfied with that answer. Then he headed upstairs. A few minutes later after he fell asleep, I quietly opened his laptop. His email account was still open. And there it was. The message Linda mentioned. After the divorce, Vanessa and I can finally start over. I stared at the sentence for a very long time. Then I softly closed the laptop. And for the first, the kind that permanently changes lives, usually happens quietly. Mine started while Daniel slept upstairs, completely unaware that his world was already collapsing. At 5:12 the next morning, I emailed every document to 3 people. Richard Carter, the company's legal department, and my attorney. Expense reports, bank statements, hotel receipts, screenshots of Daniel's emails with Vanessa. Then I shut the laptop quietly and went downstairs to make coffee. Noah woke up around 6. I fed him while sunrise slowly filled the kitchen with pale gold light. Birds chirped outside like it was an ordinary morning. But inside me, something had permanently changed. The fear was gone. That shocked me most. For months I'd been terrified of losing Daniel. Terrified of becoming a single mother. Terrified of being alone. But once the truth fully stepped into the light, fear lost its grip. By 7:30 Daniel came downstairs dressed in one of his expensive navy suits. Relaxed, confident, clueless. He poured coffee while checking his phone, then frowned. Huh. I bounced Noah gently against my shoulder. What? My 9 o'clock meeting disappeared. I shrugged lightly. Maybe it got cancelled. Maybe. He kissed Noah's forehead absent-mindedly before heading toward the door. Then he paused. You okay? He asked. The question almost made me laugh. Instead, I looked directly at him. I'm fine, Daniel. Something in my voice made him hesitate. But only briefly. Then he grabbed his briefcase and left. At exactly 9:17 that morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Whitmore? A man asked. Yes. This is Human Resources from Carter Development. We need to confirm whether you currently share financial accounts with Dan. Then I hung up. 10 minutes later Linda called. They escorted Vanessa out first, she said quietly. I sat down slowly. What about Daniel? He's in a conference room with legal. I imagined the exact moment realization hit him. The confusion. The panic. The fear. Linda's voice softened. Richard is devastated. That hit me unexpectedly hard. Because Daniel didn't only betray me. He betrayed people who trusted him. Men like Richard Carter came from a generation where loyalty actually meant something. Daniel traded all of that for ego and hotel rooms. By noon my attorney called. We filed emergency financial protections this morning, she explained. You acted quickly. That helped. I looked toward Noah sleeping nearby. Will we lose the house? No, she answered firmly. Not if I can help it. For the first time in days, I breathed fully. Then around 1:30, tires screeched into the driveway. Daniel. I stood slowly before he burst through the front door. His face looked gray. His tie hung loose. What the hell did you do? He shouted. Noah startled awake, crying immediately. I picked him up calmly. I protected my son. Daniel stared at me like he'd never seen me before. They fired Vanessa, he yelled. They froze my accounts. You mean the company accounts you were stealing from? His mouth opened slightly. For the first time ever. Daniel looked afraid. You went through my office. You stole from your family, I answered quietly. That money was temporary. I almost laughed. Temporary. As if betrayal somehow hurts less when you plan to stop later. Daniel paced the kitchen wildly. You have no idea what you've done. No. Irraplia sufli. You did this to yourself. Then anger darkened his face. You think you're innocent, he snapped. You stopped caring about me months ago. I had a newborn baby, I said calmly. I was surviving. You were cold. I was exhausted. You stopped trying. I stared at him several seconds before speaking again. And you responded by sleeping with your assistant and stealing $80,000. Silence. Daniel looked away first. That mattered more than he realized. Because narcissists survive arguments. But shame? Shame destroys them. I adjusted Noah against my shoulder while Daniel unraveled right there in our kitchen. Then his phone rang again. He answered instantly. Yes. I watched the color drain from his face. What do you mean frozen? Pause. No, you can't do that. Longer pause. My personal accounts too? He slowly lowered the phone. What happened? I asked quietly. Daniel stared blankly ahead. The bank flagged everything. Of course they had. The company investigation triggered fraud alerts connected to every financial trail leading back to him. For several moments neither of us spoke. Then Daniel whispered something I never expected to hear. I think I ruined my life. Not our marriage. Not our family. His life. Even then, his selfishness remained at the center of his grief. That told me everything. Around 4 that afternoon my attorney arrived carrying separation paperwork. Daniel looked up sharply after reading the first page. You filed for separation. I held Noah closer. Yes. You're serious. I thought about every night I sat awake alone feeding Noah while he disappeared into hotel rooms with another woman. Then I answered honestly. I don't know. Daniel nodded slowly like a man finally meeting the consequences of his choices. Before leaving, he looked down at Noah sleeping in my arms. I never meant to hurt him. I looked directly at my husband. But you did. Then Daniel walked out the front door as darkness settled across the neighborhood. And for the first time since becoming a mother, I finally felt safe inside my own home. The hardest part of betrayal isn't always the heartbreak itself. Sometimes it's the silence afterward, the empty side of the bed, the missing coffee cup, the strange calm after chaos finally leaves your house. For weeks after Daniel moved out, I barely slept. Not because I missed him, because my body forgot how to relax. Every sound outside made me tense. Every car at night made my stomach tighten. I kept expecting another fight, another lie, another disaster. But slowly life softened again. Noah began sleeping through the night longer. Spring returned to Ohio. The trees outside turned green. And somehow, despite everything, the world kept moving. My mother came over almost every morning during those early months. Carol was 70 years old, widowed nearly a decade, and far tougher than most people realized. She never overwhelmed me with advice. She simply showed up, folded laundry, rocked Noah while I showered, cooked meals when I was too exhausted to function. One afternoon while we sat on the porch watching Noah nap in his stroller, she finally spoke about Daniel carefully. "Your father betrayed me once too," she said softly. I looked at her stunned. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Long before you were born." The confession shocked me. My parents always seemed solid, safe, loyal, normal. Mom smiled faintly at my expression. "Marriage isn't made of perfect people, sweetheart. It's made of flawed people deciding whether they're willing to grow." I stared quietly across the yard. "Did you forgive him?" "Yes." "Why?" Her eyes drifted toward Noah sleeping peacefully. "Because your father truly changed." That stayed with me longer than I expected. Because honesty, not romance, was what disappeared from my marriage. Meanwhile, Daniel's life kept unraveling publicly. Carter Development officially terminated him by early April. Word spread quickly throughout our small community. Men like Richard Carter carried influence and disappointment. Daniel called occasionally asking about Noah. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I didn't. But every conversation sounded different now. Smaller somehow. The arrogance was gone. In its place sat fear and regret. One evening he called while I bathed Noah. "Vanessa left," he said quietly. I adjusted Noah carefully in the water. "I'm sorry." And strangely enough, I meant it. Daniel laughed bitterly. "She stayed 6 days after I lost my job." That image explained everything. Affairs stop looking glamorous once the money disappears. "She moved in with some guy from Columbus," he added. I stayed quiet. Then Daniel whispered something surprising. "I don't even think I loved her." I sat beside the tub while Noah splashed water against my sleeve. "Then why did you do it?" Long silence. Finally he answered honestly. "Because she made me feel important." That sentence hit deeper than he realized. Not because it excused him, because it explained him. Daniel had turned 42 that year. Gray hair was toward someone who only knew the polished version of him. By summer I returned to work part-time at Mercy General Hospital. The first morning I put my scrubs back on. I cried in the parking lot before my shift. Not because I was unhappy, because I recognized myself again. There's something healing about becoming independent after someone convinced you that you were weak. My co-workers welcomed me warmly. Most were older women who understood more than they said aloud. One nurse hugged me during lunch and whispered, "Men fall apart faster than women realize." I laughed harder than I had in months. Still, healing wasn't linear. Some nights grief returned unexpectedly. Like when I found one of Daniel's hoodies buried in the closet, and remembered how safe I once felt inside his arms. Or when Noah smiled exactly like him. Those moments hurt differently. Because grief becomes complicated when the person you miss is also the person who broke you. Then came Noah's first birthday. I almost didn't invite Daniel. My attorney advised against it emotionally. But something inside me remembered my mother's words. Flawed people deciding whether they're willing to grow. So I allowed him to come for 1 hour. No more. Daniel arrived carrying a small paper bag and looking thinner than I remembered. The confidence was completely gone. Instead of tailored suits, he wore jeans and an old flannel shirt. He looked older. Not physically. Spiritually. When he saw Noah wobbling around the coffee table trying to walk, tears immediately filled his eyes. "Hey buddy," he whispered. Noah smiled instantly. That nearly broke me because children love without history attached to it. Daniel handed me the paper bag awkwardly. Inside sat a small wooden toy train. My breath caught immediately. My father used to carve those by hand before arthritis destroyed. "I found it in storage," Daniel said quietly. "Your dad made it before our wedding." I ran my fingers across the worn wood silently. Then Daniel looked directly at me. "I spent so much time chasing attention," he whispered, "that I forgot who stayed beside me when I had nothing." The room went completely still. No excuses. No blame. No manipulation. Only truth. And strangely enough, that hurt more than the lies ever did. A year after Daniel walked out of our house smelling like another woman's perfume, he sat beside me at Noah's preschool orientation wearing a plain blue sweater and nervously holding a folder full of paperwork he'd probably checked 3 times already. It was strange how ordinary life looked after surviving heartbreak. Children ran around colorful classrooms while fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Noah proudly held Daniel's hand, pointing excitedly at toy trucks. "Daddy, look." Daniel smiled immediately. And for the first time in a long time, the smile reached his eyes. Not because life magically repaired itself. Because humility had finally entered it. That's what people rarely talk about after betrayal. Sometimes marriages end forever. Sometimes they survive. But either way, nobody walks away unchanged. Especially the person who caused the damage. By then Daniel had spent nearly a year rebuilding his life from nothing. The criminal investigation ended without jail time, mostly because Richard Carter pushed for restitution after Daniel cooperated fully. Daniel sold almost everything he owned to repay the stolen money. The luxury SUV disappeared. The expensive watches disappeared. Even his pride disappeared eventually. Especially that. He found work managing inventory for a small hardware supplier outside town. The salary was modest compared to his old life, but he showed up every day without complaint. And slowly, people started respecting him again. Because he stopped acting entitled to it. Meanwhile, I rebuilt too. Nursing became more than a career. It became proof that I still existed outside heartbreak and motherhood. Noah grew happy and healthy. My relationship with my mother deepened. Life became quieter, simpler, more honest. Daniel and I remained legally separated during that first year, but eventually we learned how to sit in the same room again without bitterness poisoning the air. At first we only discussed Noah, schedules, doctor visits, daycare. But eventually honesty entered the spaces between us. One rainy October evening, Daniel dropped Noah off after dinner and lingered awkwardly near the doorway. "You got a minute?" he asked. Part of me wanted to say no, but the calmer version of myself simply nodded. We sat together at the same kitchen table, where our marriage once shattered. For several moments neither of us spoke. Then Daniel looked down at his hands. "I've spent the last year trying to understand how I became that person." I stayed quiet. "Therapy helps," he admitted with an embarrassed smile. "Turns out middle-aged men can be incredibly stupid." I almost laughed. Then his expression turned serious again. I think I was terrified. "Of what?" "Aging," he answered honestly. "Failing. Becoming irrelevant. Watching life turn into responsibility instead of excitement." Rain tapped softly against the windows. "You were giving everything to Noah, which you should have been. But instead of understanding that, I became selfish." I studied him carefully. The old Daniel would have blamed me entirely. This version didn't. "I punished you for becoming a mother," he whispered. The sentence landed heavily between us. Because it was true. Some men love the idea of family more than the sacrifices family requires. Daniel finally looked up. "I hurt the one person who loved, and more like grief." I folded my hands slowly on the table. "You didn't only hurt me," I said quietly. You changed how safe the world felt to me. Daniel nodded immediately. I know. And some days I still don't know if I can fully forgive you. I know that too. No defensiveness. No anger. Just acceptance. And that mattered more than grand apologies ever could. By Christmas we both started attending church again separately but peacefully. One Sunday the pastor asked Daniel to speak privately to a men's marriage group. He almost refused. Then he stood in front of 20 men and simply told the truth. No dramatics. No performance. Just honesty. I spent years confusing attention with love, he admitted. While my wife stayed home exhausted raising our son almost alone, I chased validation from someone who only knew the easiest version of me. The room stayed silent. Then Daniel added something that stayed with me forever. If your wife is carrying your child, losing sleep beside your child, sacrificing herself for your family, and you still feel neglected, the problem might not be her. Several older men quietly nodded. One wiped tears from his eyes. Because people over 60 understand something younger people often don't. Strong marriages aren't built during exciting seasons. They're built during exhausting ones. During bills. During sleepless nights. During sickness. During routine. During disappointment. Real love survives ordinary life. That spring Daniel joined Noah and me for a picnic after preschool. Nothing dramatic happened. No movie-style kiss. No sudden reunion. Just sunlight through trees while our little boy laughed feeding ducks beside the pond. Peaceful. Simple. Earned. As sunset painted the water gold, Noah climbed sleepily into Daniel's lap while I packed leftover sandwiches away. Daniel looked at me softly. For what? For not teaching our son to hate me. I stared quietly across the lake before answering. Hate poisons children before it poisons adults. And I meant that too. Maybe some betrayals destroy families forever. But sometimes they force people to finally become honest enough to rebuild differently. Not perfectly. Not easily. But truthfully. So if you're listening tonight carrying pain inside your own marriage, your own family, or your own heart, remember this. Pride destroys quietly. Temptation lies beautifully. And the people who love us during our weakest seasons are often the ones we foolishly overlook. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes healing is possible after heartbreak. And subscribe for more stories about love, betrayal, forgiveness, and second chances.